How are you? So we are going to start. We're gonna jump right in. So I'm just gonna ask, like, how long have you been a nurse? Because I feel like I don't know how many years it's been.
So since 1991. So do the math.
God, mom, 91. That makes sense because that's the year I transitioned from sixth grade to seventh grade. And
That's
that was the
right.
first graduation that we got to share together.
Exactly. So since 1991, I've been a nurse and it's been a journey.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And to me, I remember very specifically some of the things that you've experienced as a nurse and got to go through it with you. And I often tell people, like, my mom and I kind of grew up together professionally. Like, there were graduations together and things like that. We went to school at the same time. Granted,
Right.
she was doing higher education, but then it came to a point where we were both getting our master's degrees at the same
That's right.
time. So, you
That's
know,
right.
I always find that interesting. Hey, Tiffany, how are you? There's two Tiffany's on here, so um, so
So
I
yes,
I wanted
I
to.
was going to say I was a little bit of a, some people would call it a late bloomer. So, when I started going to school, it just, I had three children, and, I was married, had three children. And of course, you being the oldest probably have the most memory of some of those earlier times.
Right.
So,
Um, so I wanted to ask, like, what was your first experience as a nurse? Because I know it wasn't in labor and delivery.
no, I was in medical surgical nursing, just a regular med
Med
surg
surg.
unit
Okay.
with male, female, of an age of 18 and above.
Okay. Okay. So basically, that's everybody who comes in who could potentially
Everybody,
be
whatever
admitted to
that
the
general,
hospital.
yep, that general information, that nursing, general nursing, basically.
Okay. And so my second question is, when did you know you wanted to go specifically in maternal health?
So to be honest, in nursing school, I had one of the most dynamic, I thought, at least I felt she was, one of the most dynamic OB nurse educators. And I was really inspired by her. It's funny because today I was sitting thinking, what is her name? And I knew it's Grand something, like Grand. I really couldn't, I can't think of it, but I know that she inspired me. She was actually a Black woman. She was one of the few who was a Black instructor, and she was really so kind, and she spoke about, and you can see the passion in her, and that was really what drove me to think that I really wanted to do maternal child health.
That's awesome. I mean, it's
Maternal,
always good. We always have that teacher that pushes us to the next level or
yes,
helps us to realize who we want to be in the world, what we want to do. And, I always tell people, like, Miss Lloyd Blackman is that person, right? Like, she helped me figure out what college was best for me. And then, because I loved writing, she helped me find that passion. And so now I'm writing books. So it's always wonderful to
right,
hear that I'm not the only person who's had that experience, and people are like, finding that teacher to kind of help them along their way. And that's
right.
good. I mean, persons who really take their job seriously are often helping people move forward. So I'm really glad to hear that. um so I remember kind of when you went from, like, what was it, Baker 15 and Whitney 5.
Yes, that's where I did my med surg nursing, Baker 15 and Whitney 5.
And then you went to the labor and delivery floor, but it was, what is it?
M for maternal,
Yeah,
M8.
M8. Okay, that's what it was. M8. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what it is because I know, because now it was like seven on the seventh floor. It was seven central, seven south, and all of those things. But
7 West was labor
seven
and
west.
delivery, and
That's
now
what
they're
it.
no longer there.
Right.
They're
They
in their own
moved.
building.
They since moved, and so
Yes,
it's. I mean, like you said, I guess because I'm the oldest, I really remember the journey from going
right.
from nursing student to, to a actual nurse. I remember you taking the boards and studying for that. I don't know. I really have vivid memories of you becoming a nurse. And So once you became a nurse, you did med surge for a while, and then you went into maternal health and went to the labor and delivery floor, which honestly I thought was like super exciting. And I was just like, that's so cool. You get to watch babies be born. Like,
Yeah.
I thought that was exciting. But I remember one day specifically, you came home and I was just, and you know, no, that was a day I came. It was like take your daughter to work day or something. And I was with you at the hospital. I don't know why maybe it was something like that. Whatever the reason was, I was there and it was like all this chaos because I couldn't follow you around on the floor. I had to like
Right.
with the
Right.
receptionist and the nurses, and they were really cool. But I remember like something was happening with one of the patients, like it was an emergency. And I think that was when I realized that it's not always happiness in labor and delivery.
Now that's
And
true.
yeah. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's, it felt scary because I was watching the monitors and we saw when the contractions were happening. And then all of a sudden there was like, there was a like something emergent that had to happen. And I was
Right.
just like,
And
oh
I
my
don't remember specifically that event, but I'm sure, it could have been someone had a decel, the baby's heart rate went down. It could have been a myriad of things that could have happened. But yes, so labor and delivery is for the most part is wonderful, but when stuff goes, you move.
yeah.
It's own
Everything has to happen fast.
ED. Right. It's its own mini ED for maternal health.
That's true. I never thought about it like that. Yeah. So emergency for women who are having babies. So what was the transition from going from being on the floor and being a nurse and, really working with patients on a regular basis to becoming a supervisor? What was that like?
So for me, it was a little gradual
Okay.
because I was a staff nurse, of course,
Mhm.
and we had a little track that you could be a senior staff nurse.
Okay.
So doing that, I had some responsibilities. I worked putting the schedules together. We've transitioned from M8 to 7 West. I would help coordinate the cabinets that we utilized in the rooms, and just a lot of things. It was really so. As a senior staff nurse, I had a little more responsibilities, being in charge majority of the time. So all of those things kind of like gave me a little platform or a little launching pad.
Mhm.
And then from there, I was an assistant nurse manager, then I became a nurse manager, and so on and so forth. The transition for me was gradual. I did it in a few different places, so
Okay.
that was very helpful because you not only learn how people think and what they do, but you also learn a lot of things that people do at different hospitals, and
Right.
how they function and how they lead and how others lead. And, so that was what was, I think was really good for me.
Do you think going to the military and being a nurse in the military helped you in your civilian jobs?
So yes, yes, it did, but it helped me in a different way. And I think it was more because, um, you know, sometimes in the military, and not so much just nursing, but in the military structure, some can be a little concrete at times. And, you get people who have various ways of being leaders and bosses and things like
Mhm.
that. So it helped me with that. I learned people well, and I have a very good knack for kind of reading people and understanding, even though I might not say much to them, but I do
Mhm.
understand what's going on.
So you sit back and observe the room.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good skill to have. Like, we always tell Kaden, like, if you're talking, you're not listening. So if you're always
Right.
running your mouth, how can you ever hear or
Here.
understand what's going on around you? So trying to be more observant and taking a back seat and, yes, ask questions because questions
Right.
help you get information, right? But you know, what what I'm trying to get him to understand is like just shush more and listen more. But I know he comes by that honestly, right? Like I'm a chatty Cathy and I understand who his mother is.
Yes,
So
yes, he can't help it because he is his mother's child.
so we know that's a thing, but good to be observant. So Tiffany Hightower is asking, what has been your best experience being a nurse stateside or abroad? That's an interesting question.
Wow. So my best experience, I'm trying states. So my best experience was really twofold. So I'd say at the bedside, my best experience was just those days of being with patients and delivering babies on a regular basis. That was really, I have pictures and cards and things that patients had give you cards and stuff like that, or send you a picture of their baby after the baby's born. And I think those were really, really the best days. Now, abroad, I think it was probably, I think probably in Afghanistan, actually, because I spent a lot more time with the young men who came in, and lots of times they had what they call TBIs, and they had brain injuries and stuff. So it's just talking to them and supporting them, and they were scared, and really all they wanted to do was go back out, even though it wasn't meant for them to do that at that point, but they just wanted to go back out and be with their fellow comrades who they were fighting with, and they felt like they were really losing because they weren't supporting them. So just talking to them and supporting them, and even when you were giving them their medications, just having that time with them, I think was really one of the best times that I had when I was in military and being a nurse.
Mm. Um, I feel like I want to cry because like this is the most I feel like you've ever talked about your time in the military. Like I think one time I asked you a question about something, and me being a social worker, it was it was ironic because that first when you went to Iraq was when I started social work school, and I remember like being in class and we were talking about like soldiers and like the impact of mental health on soldiers, and I was just like, I kind of just didn't want to be in the room because it's like, you guys, my mom is there, like this is not, it's one thing when you talk about something and you don't have a personal connection to it. It's another thing when you're like,
Right.
it's happening in the moment, and it's like, the impact of those conversations were hard, but we don't ever really have those kinds of conversations. So
It's funny. I think lately I've thought about it a lot more because I really haven't, I don't, that's just, I'm not that kind of person anyway that expresses everything.
nope.
So, see, she's getting on me, y'all. But anyway, I'm just not that kind of person. But I think that it's very healthy to kind of get some of those things out. Because right now, just talking a little bit about it, I feel that impact that it had, all those years ago. But I can still tell that it had an impact.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can't really imagine. So so one question that so Dalia, who I interviewed the other day on Instagram, who's also a nurse, ironically. I got so many nurse people in my life. She says, what was the most C-sections you've seen a mom have? Mm.
Oh, wow. So that's funny. That brings me back to a time, I think I was at, well, at the time it was New York Hospital of Queens, now it's NYP Queens. But there was a lady there who was having her seventh, this was going to be, yeah, her seventh C-section.
Whoa.
Now, believe
Dalia,
me,
they got you beat. Dalia
believe me, they definitely tried to counsel her and and get her not to technically have another baby, but people have their own mind. They knew she was going to end up having a section. Things were prepared. It went south,
Oh.
and And although I know later she did recover, but she really had a hard time. I mean, the bleeding and everything, and you know, she was really a sick lady after all of that. So that's the most I've seen. But I remember that night very vividly because I have a friend who had 4 C-sections. And I called her, and because you know we that kind of friend. And I called her. It was at night, in the middle of the night. Don't you ever have another baby? I don't care what you do.
Right, because when you see stuff like that, you're like, oh my gosh, that's kind of scary. Like, you don't want to see anybody you love go through something like that. And I can only imagine how her children, who are already, living, and her partner or husband were experiencing that with her. That's really scary. And like I said, Zalia, my brave soul friend who I interviewed the other day, she has 6 beautiful boys, and they were all C-sections.
Wow. Wow. Good.
So I
good.
think that's why she was asking to see if you knew anybody who had beat her out in the number of sections.
Yeah, so and this lady was on her 7th. I remember that. And that was, it was, but she didn't have any more after that.
Yeah, I can imagine, because after that, it might be a little difficult. So Tiffany Lewis English is asking, I often struggle being 38, a wife, and trying to conceive, but I am returning to school for my RN. What some advice you may give?
So don't give up hope about having a baby. That's number one. Number one, don't give up hope. Let me tell you. So with all of the things that I am, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, and a nurse, and a retired lieutenant colonel, I am a strong believer that God has a plan. Okay, so even if you might not know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but don't give up hope. Okay, have faith. Have faith. Okay, I'm a strong believer that God, that we need to continue to strive for whatever it is that we want, and continue to talk to Him and work in His plan. And maybe becoming a nurse is going to lead you down a path. And everybody, of course, wants to physically, have that baby. I can understand that. I have 3. I understand that. But you never know what God wants you to do in that. Okay. So go down that path of becoming a nurse. It is nothing like it. I was, I think 31 when something like that. Yeah, 91. No, actually, I wasn't 31 yet. I was 30 because I didn't make 31 until December, and I became a nurse in July. July, yeah. That's when I took my boards, and they let me work until my boards came back, because those days we didn't do the computer and it didn't pop up and tell us.
I remember we had to wait. We had to wait for the paper in the mail. We had to wait for the paper in the mail, and it
was in October when it came. But I lost my train of thought. Okay, but definitely work down that path to become a nurse, because there's something. If you want to do that, there's something for you in it. There's something for you.
Well, Tiffany, I think you're already on the right path, and I know that. She's actually a doula right now. So she's already like in process of doing some things that are gonna probably make her becoming a nurse a lot easier, honestly.
That's good. That's good.
I am going to ask maybe one more question about your professional life, and then we're going to switch gears to your personal life a little bit. How often do you, as an administrator, find yourself in spaces where you're the only woman of color?
Well, I happen to work now. When I worked in the city, that was definitely not the case.
Okay.
But I work in Orange County, and the hospital where I work as a nurse, I'm definitely in my level and above. So when you talk about it, we have the women who are nurse directors, and we have a few nurse directors who are of color, and and then we have nurse administrators and VPs, and then the people who are in the C-suite, as we call them, like the CNOs, but some of them are VPs.
Okay.
So as far as that's concerned, I am the only woman of color. So yes, but it can be a challenge, but I think that I've had wonderful people who led me as women of color, and I think that I've taken some of their it's hard because we know that sometimes we have a different way of communicating. I have a very booming voice, and it can be a little difficult. People think take things a little bit take things wrong sometimes, and I know that's just and that's I guess we all do that. Our cultural sensitivities sometimes get challenged.
Well, I personally have watched you, grow and climb in your career, and I think it's even though I'm not a nurse and I haven't followed that per se, I think it's been good for me to see that progression, because then I know that it's possible to get into those kinds of spaces, right?
Right.
And I think it's important for young women to see people who look like them doing those kinds of things. You can't dream about doing something if you don't know anybody else who's ever done it, right? So seeing people in position of power, or in managerial positions, I think that's always important for our young women to see. And that's what Verkeya Speaks is becoming about, having young women and helping to get them into spaces where they want to be, educationally, or as far as their career is concerned, professionally. And even if it's not necessarily doing higher education, but maybe it's a vocation that they're interested
Right.
in. So everybody takes different paths, and
Yes, right.
that's how this conversation started, right? We talked about how you were going to school while your children were going to school. And so it doesn't matter when you do it, it's about doing it and doing it well. And I think young people need to know that don't give up hope.
That's right.
Whenever the time
That's right.
comes, do it. If the opportunity presents itself, do it. And so I'm really excited, for whatever the next steps are for you, because it'll just continue to remind me that if I just keep, doing the work and representing myself well, then I'll get into those places and spaces. And so
Right.
thank you for being a good example of what it's like to move into those spaces. Do you think that C-sections are happening more than they should?
So that's a kind of a tough question in
Okay.
some respects, because I have to pull some statistics and some things and look at information.
Numbers.
So in the over the entire United States, there are hospitals where their C-section rate is 7%, and then there's some hospitals where their C-section rate is 70%.
Wow, that's such a vast difference.
That is a huge difference. Huge difference. Now, I got some data from the CDC, and it's really 2019 data, because it takes a while before they pull it all together. So this was published, of course, in 2020, but this is the 2019 data. And in the U.S., and I have to actually give you some clarification. So when they count the C-section rates, primarily it's due to what we call NTSV, right? So that stands for nulliparous, term, single, vertex. So the nulliparous is a woman who has never given birth, right?
So like me.
And term, no, well, okay, hang on. And term is anywhere from 39 weeks to 40 weeks and 6 days. Okay, before they turn 41 weeks. So, and the S for single, of course, you're carrying one fetus, one baby. And then the V is vertex. So it's NTSV. So it's vertex. That means the head's down, it's facing down. So that's what they primarily calculate when they talk about. So it's the nulliparous, they're at term, and they have one single baby inside, and it's vertex. And that rate in the US for 2019 was 25.6, right? Now the overall C-section rate in the US, and that includes everybody else, was 31.7. So you see those hospitals whose rates could potentially be in the, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, which I can't even imagine.
Right.
If their rates are that high and the overall rate was 31.7, what in the world are they doing? So to answer that question, I can't specifically say, do I think, sure, there's times when I know that maybe somebody could have been a little more patient, and waited a little bit and given that mom a little bit more time. Absolutely. But I also know that, there are times when there's no other choice.
Okay. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, you hear stories and it's just like, oh my gosh, I mean, I know some people who've labored for really long and then they're like, okay, we're just gonna go do a C-section. But then there are other situations where I've heard and I'm like, okay, why didn't they wait a little longer? And so the other also includes those C-sections that are planned, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but if they were in that category, if they were 39, I mean, so most C-sections now, they don't typically, at least what that I've seen, I can't say everywhere, but what I've seen is most C-sections, if they're planning it, it's for a reason. It's a
Right.
medical reason, an obstetrical reason, something like that. It's not just because the doctor needs to go play golf or something like that, something stupid. So, they're not planning it for that.
Yeah, I mean, Caden was planned, but because I had preeclampsia previously, because I
Right.
had lupus, so yeah. And then even then, he decided he wanted to play a game and early while I went to my appointment, and he came even earlier. So yeah,
Right.
I mean that makes a lot of sense. Of all of these women who are having C-sections, is the rate of women of color higher than
So
non?
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So as I said, the total C-section rate for 2019 was 31.7, right? Now, when we talk about non-Hispanic white women, the rate is 30.7. When we talk about Hispanic women, it's 31.3. We talk about non-Hispanic Black women, it's 35.9, almost 36%. So we definitely have a ways to go in order to support us. And this is so prevalent now. Last week, it was Black Maternal Health Week. And we know that there is a disparity in how Black women are treated and how they're cared for.
Yep.
So, so I have to say this as a nurse. As a nurse, we're really advocates. That's part of our job, to be advocates for our patients.
Right.
Now, being an advocate doesn't mean you can tell other people what to do because you're not a practitioner, but you're still, you're not a medical practitioner or an NP or something, or a midwife or something in that category, but you are a nurse. You're a nurse, so you are a nurse. You practice nursing. So, but we have to really think about being advocates for our patients when someone's in labor and they really have gotten to a point where maybe the labor's slowing down and they could really be supported by, the nurse to say, well, let's keep going. Let's give it a try. What do you need me to do to help you, so that you can get through this? So that's the thing that, as nurses, that I feel that we really need to step up and do even more of.
Okay. I like that. I mean, of course, as a social worker, I'm advocating all the time for things. And then, you know, so, but it's good to hear that and, you know, letting future nurses know, and even nurses who aren't doing that right now, like, yeah, maybe this is a role you need to take on more often than not. So I'm glad to hear that. So it's, you know, you kind of just answered a lot of our questions about, you know, African American women and in maternal health and just like, you know, all of those things. Do you think these things are happening to women of color, Black women specifically, because of unconscious bias?
So yes, I do believe so. I believe so. So, you know, let's see. So it's funny. It's definitely unconscious bias. I went to A1, which is one of the oh, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But it's one of our
Is that
that's a shame. Our it won't even come out. So it's one of the things that one of our I can't even think. Anyway, it it's one of our our bodies that we look to because it's about nurses. So they make you know, they make recommendations, they put out information, they put out education, and it all has to do with obstetrics and OB and neonatal nursing. So I think it was about 3 years ago was the last time I went to an A1 conference, and a lot of the information that they shared was they had a panel discussion, and it was about women of color and the unconscious bias. So they showed a video, and one of a person who was sitting next to me was Caucasian. The other young lady next to me was African American, and you know, we're all friends. We're talking and stuff, and it's and nothing bad against the person, but they showed this video and they said that doesn't really happen. And the video was about, you know, a woman of color who was speaking to a doctor who was Caucasian, and you know, and she was like, "So you're not feeling that, are you? You can't be. You're only such and such." So in their mind, they wrap things around what they think and not what the person is saying. So you know, so they just, but she didn't really believe that happened. And I just looked at her and I said, really? I said, but you can't understand it because you've never walked in that shoe. I said, I've been there. I've had people dismiss me, you know, and as I've had people dismiss me as a patient. I've had people dismiss me as a nurse. And just, I mean, just anything. So, and just as a person on the subway, you get dismissed. So so people have things in their head and they wrap themselves around what they think, and they never really, you know, play that conscious role of what's happening in there and what's going on at that moment. They just have these things that these preconceived notions that are in their heads, and it just continues to go on. And they don't realize when they bring it to the table. And I'm not saying that I haven't had any myself. I mean, you know, but as a caregiver, I've learned to, you know, be a little bit more attentive. And now as a leader, when I'm even speaking to staff and my leaders, you know, it's about stop, listen, you know, try to think about what they're saying and how they're feeling and where they're sitting, you know, because as a nurse leader, a Black nurse leader, sometimes it can be difficult even in that setting, you know, trying to lead people and they don't even think that, you know, think about how that might make you feel, whatever they're saying.
Right. So I just want to say this because Dalia wrote a comment in the ED. I've seen that happen notoriously with sickle cell patients. And
Yes.
I'm kind of shocked by that because I'm like, everybody knows when people are in crisis with sickle cell how painful that is. And honestly, Dalia, you know, I guess I can believe it, because as a person who experiences chronic pain, I've experienced some of those things in the ED in New York City. And believe it, and I know people like, but you live in New York. So what? I'm a black woman. I have lupus. When I go to the ER, half the time the doctors are asking me what to do. And I'm like, who has the medical degree? Me and you. But at the same time, I'm glad that I know enough about my medical history, specifically with lupus, to tell them what needs to be done, or what my doctor generally does when these things occur. Because on plenty of occasions, I've walked in and they're like, well, what kind of meds? And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Like, just give me some steroids. Give me, I can't think of the name. It starts with a T, one of those pain medications. So it could
Toradol.
yeah, Toradol. That's it. And I'm like, and let's make moves, because otherwise, forget it. Like, so it's kind of interesting, um, that
So Dalia, I can't see the information, but it's funny that you said that, because I remember this young woman. She was very tall. She had sickle cell. She was pregnant. This is in the 90s, and she was black, and she really had a hard time, because every time, and when you're in crisis and you're pregnant, and of course they want to make sure, they want to give you fluids and stuff, because they want to make sure that those sickled cells don't clot up and cut the supply off to the baby through the placenta. So they had a hard time, because sometimes it was like, oh, she just wants pain, she just wants medicine. I'm like, but this young woman does not appear that she just wants medicine. She appears, and you would know that once you gave her something, or and she started drinking a lot of fluids, or giving her IV, and and when it started to calm down, you could tell. So it wasn't really like she was they called them drug seekers. So a drug seeker. So yeah.
That's unfortunate, that people aren't getting the care that they need just because people are making assumptions about who they are. But we have to start believing when people are saying that they're in pain. Like,
Right.
it's just one of the, I mean, and I think my thoughts have become more open around these things, or I guess I would say I'm thinking about it more, because I've never experienced, I didn't quite understand that until I'm sitting, like you said, until you're in somebody's shoes, you
Right.
have no
Exactly.
idea as to what they're experiencing. It's really unfortunate. So yeah, so how many children do you have, Mom?
Three.
Were we all C-sections?
So yes, you are C-sections. Now, let me tell you how how it progressed for me. So I had an induction because I was like 41 and change with you.
Oh,
So
I didn't know
41
that.
weeks and a few days. And and I had an induction. I had Pitocin, and I didn't have an epidural. So people thought I was crazy, but I didn't have one. And and then I got to, was taking a while, and I got to about, I don't know, 7 centimeters or 6 or 7 centimeters. And they were like, well, what we think we're going to do? We're going to do what we call, what they call the serial induction. They don't do really those anymore. So, and which means they would turn it off. I was going to go and sleep for the night and come back and start it all again in the morning. So, um, but then they checked me, and I was like 9 centimeters before they decided to turn it off. So like, oh, so you progressed. So finally get to finally start, to push and everything, and nothing. Push. Fetal heart rate went down. The fetal heart rate went down. Then finally, it just went down so long and so that they were like, okay, this baby's not coming out. So I had a C-section for what they call terminal bradycardia. The fetal heart rate went down and was taking too long to come back up. So I had a C-section. Now with my second child, Valen, I had what we tried to do, and they encourage women to do, is what is called a TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after cesarean.
Oh,
TOLAC.
not a
A trial
VBAC.
of labor after, huh?
Not a VBAC.
So a VBAC is when it's accomplished.
Oh, okay.
So a
So you have
vaginal
to go
birth,
all the way through it for it to be
right?
called a VBAC.
Yeah.
Y'all all technical.
So I had a TOLAC, and I went into labor spontaneously. And I was at the hospital, and I was, in labor. Then they gave me a little bit of PIT, and
That's Pitocin, guys.
Pitocin. And then I got to like 5 to 6 centimeters. I think that was the last thing that they charted, 5 to 6. And it just didn't happen. I labored and labored. Nothing happened. Finally, they said, well, we think we're going to have to give you a C-section again. And, like, oh, no, okay. So I tried for quite some time, but it just didn't happen. And it probably would have never happened, because whereas you were 6'15", oh God, she's gonna kill me because I can't remember right now, but she was seven something. Anyway, she was bigger than you, and your head came out like smashed. And so, and later on, I found out that my pelvis is kind of what they call flat, So it wasn't, y'all weren't gonna come out anyway. And the only person I had a planned C-section for was Keenan.
Oh. Because I guess at that point they were like, let's not try this again.
No, and I wasn't really willing to try it again either.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's a little different, but I'm sure the initial one with me was probably the most scariest, because you didn't have, it was your first baby altogether.
Right. And then once I was wide awake, I was pushing, everything was okay. And then all of a sudden they were like, we have to go take you. And then where I was in the hospital I was in, you removed from the, delivery room and had to go to the OR. So they had to wheel me through, take me to the OR, and then they put me right to sleep, and I had the C-section. And when I woke up, I had no idea what I had. I had no idea where I was. I was just a mess.
Like that part. I don't like it's always scary to me when people are like, they put me to sleep to have a baby. I think that's weird. I mean, even though I was awake when I had Caden, I was pretty high. I mean, with all the medication, I was pretty high. But I can't imagine sleeping through that. That to me just is strange. Do they do that often now or no?
No, that's not done very often at all. I mean, it either has to be a really true emergency, and you have no quote unquote epidural, and sometimes they're able to even pop a spinal in, even in an emergency. But typically not. It doesn't happen that often.
Okay. I'm just curious. I was just curious about that, because I'm just like, ugh, to be sleep, that's just gotta be. I can't even imagine. Like, you miss it all, kind of, sort of. Like, I mean, granted, you don't see much of anything when you have a C-section, because the draping is in front of you, and you kind of like. But even still, just to kind of like have an idea as to what's happening, I feel like is better. Did you have a birth plan for any of? I mean, besides Keenan, because obviously the plan was to have a C-section. But did you have a birth plan for myself or Valen?
Kind of. I didn't have a real true plan. I was not a nurse, y'all, and when I was so I really didn't have a true written plan. No.
Okay.
I had a semi plan. Daddy needed to be there. I wanted to have I want to try to have a vaginal delivery. So those were my two, if you want to say plan, those were my two goals at that point.
Okay. anything else you want to share about what it was like to go through a cesarean section? Like, what was the after effect? Like, after you had the cesareans, was it hard to recover? Was it hard to take care of two other children or one other child while, recovering? Because to me, that stunk. Like,
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to do. So I had a lot of help, I must say. The first time, you stay in the hospital, this was 1979, y'all. So I was in the hospital for a whole week.
oh gosh, really?
I mean, a whole week. So they kept you there forever. And, I had I had pain medications. And so here's something. I was not a nurse, right? So I realized when I was in school and they started talking about, good nursing care and rotating injections, and, make sure you find out where the patient had their injection the last time they had pain medication and all those good things. So I can say, for convenience sake, I believe, and this is what I assumed after my thought process, that because of the way my bed was set up, I'm facing y'all, so my left side of the bed was closest to the wall. It wasn't that much space. The right side had plenty of space. Almost I think but one, every time that I got pain medication, the nurse came to that side and I rolled over, and my right hip is where I got my the pain medication. So after I delivered, I went home, my hip was sore for probably about 2.5 to 3 months because they didn't rotate that site. So that taught me something when I became a nurse. Always, always, always. What was it? So when was the last time you got, where did you get your pain medication? Now it's a little different. They have Dormoff, they have Tylenol, they can put in your spinal. They have all kinds of good stuff. You can get sometimes people have PCA pumps. They have ways of managing your pain without you constantly getting injections. So, but it was pretty difficult.
That's very good to know. I mean, ladies, if there are any pregnant women out there, soon to be pregnant women, grandmothers who are supporting their daughters having children or daughters-in-law, whatever the case may be, these are things to know, right? Like, this is how we help people get through different situations, because the more knowledge we have, we know what to ask for, we know what to, we know different information. And I think that's important. Like, if we don't have the information, I always tell people, the more information you have, the more prepared you are for any situation you get in, right? And I guess I can say that because going through IVF and IUI, and which is basically fertility treatments, guys, but going through that, I had no idea. I didn't know anybody who went through it, so I really didn't have anybody to ask questions. But now I have information, so I can share it with other people. And I think that's important, because the more you walk in with, the better it is for that next person coming along, right? And then we don't have so much disparities between things, because people know what to ask for and know how to get their needs met when they're in the hospital. But ladies, if you don't do anything else, ask questions. What is this for? What am I getting? Right.
Exactly. So, that's one of the things I wanted to say in regards to, we just finishing the Black Maternal Awareness Week. So I want you all to encourage anyone who goes in the hospital for anything, really, but especially when you're in there for labor and for delivery and for just going to your doctor for your care. Ask questions, right? And don't let anybody just say, oh yeah, well, just take this.
Right.
Don't do that. Really, seriously, ask what it is, what it's for, how is it going to, and then go back and read and find out. And if you don't feel comfortable, call them up, get send that little email that you can go, you can get on your on your healthcare portal and ask questions back and forth. It's really, really, truly important that you know exactly what's going on in your body, how you need to be cared for. And if they can't, and it's the thing, I think it is, and I know I come from a generation of sometimes you just kind of like, you don't ask everything. You ask some things and then you like hold back, and and as we learn to speak out more and more and more, you must ask questions. I know you are all educated, beautiful Black women, and that's who I'm talking to at this particular moment. So don't get me wrong, if you're here and you're not, I'm not putting anybody out. I'm just trying to make sure I'm being including them in this conversation, because as a Black woman, I need to make sure that I impart something to our younger generations. And that, like I said, you're all intelligent and smart women, but I want to encourage you to always, always ask as many questions as you like. And even if, go in prepared. I think that's even better. Go in prepared with your questions so that you will really, really, really feel empowered about what's happening. So when somebody says, oh, your blood pressure is sky high, your blood pressure has been 140 over 90, like 3 or 4 times, and we have to give you this labetalol, or we have to give you this hydrolysis, or we have to give you, you can say, oh my gosh, I have preeclampsia, or I don't want to get eclampsia and have a stroke here on this bed, So I definitely should probably listen to this advice, because I already know that this is a possibility. Okay.
That's really good information, and thanks for sharing that. I mean, those are things that we experience. Like, I mean, I heard of preeclampsia obviously before I had it, but I didn't exactly know what the after effects or what they would do, and I don't ever want magnesium again. I mean, it was not a good experience because eating and then getting that medication, I was sick, and then I was vomiting it all up, and so it wasn't very pleasant, and I haven't eaten Thai food since. But these are the things that it's good to have, a part of your repertoire of information, just so you know what's going on. So are there any last things you want to say? I'm so glad that you came and you were able to share this hour with me of conversation. I think that it was informative. I'm hoping that whoever's watching got some information. Listen, we all need to be asking all kinds of questions, because you never know when that information is going to come in handy. So, if you have any other things you want to share with us before we end, I just want to say thanks again, Mom.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I was extremely nervous, but it really was a nice conversation, and I hope that someone got something from it. And even if you didn't get something for yourself, that you could pass it on to someone else.
Well, thank you so very much, Mom. I'm going to